are now being recorded. And all the attendees except the panelists are muted and their video is off, and that'll just stay that way. If you have any questions, you'll be able to do that through the Q&A. There's a Q&A box at the bottom. I prefer you use that rather than the chat. And so any questions you have like that, please send them in. If there's not time to answer all the questions, we'll do our best to get back to you with answers. Let's see, what else do I need to tell you? So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then Rich Morrow will take over. Let me give one quick look here to the attendees and see if
just so you know, Senator Ginal is in as a participant, so you may want to grab her as a panelist.
Got her. Okay.
Excellent.
So far, so good. So Senator Ginal, you're now on, but you're on mute. There you are. Good morning. Okay, well, I'm going to
unmute her microphone too.
Yeah. I'm going to introduce the panelists that we have this morning. So Representative Casey Becker is a Democrat and currently serves as the 39th Speaker of the Colorado House of Representatives, has represented House District 13, which is the Boulder area, for those of you who are not familiar with that, since 2013. Prior to that, she served on the Boulder City Council for 4 years and holds law degrees in law and real estate development and construction management. Representative Hugh McKean is a Republican representing House District 51, which includes Loveland and surrounding areas of Larimer County. Began his service in the legislature in 2017. Prior to that, served on the Loveland City Council, the New Vision Charter School Board, and Thompson School District Master Planning Board. And Senator Ginal is a Democrat representing Senate District 14, which is primarily Fort Collins. She assumed office in 2019. Prior to that, she served as the House District 52 representative from 2017 to 2019. Senator Ginal earned her BS in biology from University of New Hampshire, her MS in zoology from Iowa State University, and her PhD in reproductive endocrinology, I don't even know what that is, from Colorado State University in 1997. Senator Ginal continues to work on many issues related to improving the lot of older Coloradans. And if I see Senator, you don't see Senator Crowder show up yet. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Rich to get things going. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Bob. See, folks, we do our homework here. So as far as getting the introductions going, and I did want to say also, I want to really thank our legislators for joining us and taking the time out of their busy schedules to talk to us about what it was like during this last session with the pandemic and the economic downturn related to that. We had provided you with some general questions that we'd like you to talk around and about if you can. I'm not going to repeat those necessarily. We will have time for questions if you guys can talk for maybe 7 to 10 minutes if you think you can fill that. But we'll, after that, then we will take questions from the group. And again, we appreciate you taking the time to do this. If you want to also introduce anything else about yourselves or your districts, we're happy to entertain that as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask Speaker Becker to start us off and then have Representative McKean follow. So take it away.
Okay, hi everyone, this is Casey, and as mentioned, I represent House District 13, which is 5 counties, Western Boulder County, Gilpin, Clear Creek, Grand, and Jackson counties. And I serve as Speaker of the House, and here's my son, Ryder. Hold on just a second. You need Buddy? Buddy, I'm on a call.
I'm just grabbing.
Good morning.
Okay, sorry.
Hi guys.
This is the life of a Zoom.
Go Rocky.
Sorry, wasn't expecting that. You guys, all right. My apologies. So when we were realizing in the middle of March that we were going to have to go out of session, close the door, guys. That we were going to have to go out of session, there was really a lot that quickly needed changing and a lot of questions. This had really never happened before. So really how to go about doing that. And then when we'd be coming back in and what that was going to look like, there was just a lot to figure out. We immediately had to, when we decided to go out of session, this is sort of at the same time that schools were deciding to you know, just suspend schools for a few days. We suspended the session at first for 2 weeks. We had no idea if that was going to be sufficient or not. We also didn't know if we were going to be able to make up any time that we were going to lose by going out of session. We didn't even know how, you know, is this something that the executive committee that I'm the chair of or the entire body has to approve? How do we go about all of this? Other than that, we also had the economic forecast that we based our entire budget on that was coming out on March 16th. And we went out of session on March 13th. Over that weekend that we were out of session, we knew that the economic forecast that had been prepared and was supposed to be presented on the Monday was going to be completely wrong. And we had no idea what to expect. In fact, the people drafting the economic forecast, the state economist, the head of the Office of State Planning and Budget, had no idea how to change their economic forecast. So we knew we weren't going to be able to pass a budget right away because we had no idea what the state revenue was going to look like. We then sort of as the week, we got the forecast at the time they said, we don't know if this is a 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 3 quarter impact. We have no idea. We don't really know what to tell you guys about what state revenue is going to be and how to budget for the upcoming year. At that time, then folks were realizing 2 weeks was not going to be enough. And we knew we were going to have to delay the session longer. And we didn't know what that meant. We didn't know how long we'd be out of session and whether we'd be able to come back in. So we ended up deciding to ask the state Supreme Court to interpret the Colorado Constitution for us. And normally you can't send something straight to the Colorado Supreme Court, and normally there has to be a lawsuit. This wasn't a lawsuit. This was just a question coming from the legislature saying, we have a 120-day session. If we can't meet that because of a pandemic, what happens? So we quickly started working on drafting what's called an interrogatory to the Supreme Court, not even sure if they would take up the question. They did. They said that if we, because of a disaster, a state of emergency that was dependent on a public health crisis, then we could delay session and make up those days. And we needed all of those days because we had to completely rework the state budget. We had to figure out how the Capitol was actually going to run, because for public hearings and things, but you need to have access to the Capitol, and yet we didn't want a lot of people at the Capitol because of social distancing and things like that. We had to completely rework our entire agenda, partly because the focus of what we needed to work on was really changing, and partly because there wasn't money in the state budget to do a lot of the things that we completely talked about, or maybe there wasn't the political will to do it anymore. So we had to draft new safety protocols, figure out if we could change the rules around whether people could participate remotely, legislators and others, completely rework the budget, and completely rework a lot of the legislation we were working on. So for those 10 weeks that we stopped being in session, it was honestly some of the busiest time I've ever had in my life. It was very stressful and just really a whole lot to rework. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of everything that was going on. One of the questions is, was there general agreement in making necessary changes to typical processes and protocols? I'd say no, there really wasn't. There were some people who really didn't want remote meetings. There were some who very much wanted remote, legislators to be able to participate and vote remotely. All of it was new. We had to figure out the rules. These aren't things that you can kind of just punt on, because the rules really need to be consistent and understood by everyone. And so we had to draft a resolution to say how people could participate remotely, because there were many legislators who were frankly worried about coming in to the Capitol, being in the House committee rooms or the House chambers, Senate committee rooms or chamber, what that would mean from a public health perspective. One of the questions is, how did you decide the manner of addressing the 120-day session limit with the break? And I talked about that when we knew we were going out of session. We weren't really sure. The only really examples we had to compare it to were when the legislature didn't meet in session for when there was a snowstorm or something like that. So, like I said, we petitioned the Supreme Court. They said that 120 days is 120 days. It didn't need to be consecutive as long as there was a declared public health emergency. That we already had rules in place that had allowed that, and they upheld those rules. What did I learn from this experience? Gosh, it was it was a really challenging time, and how the legislature was going to meet and what we were doing was really only one aspect of what was happening in the entire country. I was on regular calls with other speakers of the House across the United States, where they were trying to figure it out, what was happening with their budget, what was happening with the federal dollars that were coming in, what was happening with when they were going to meet again, and all of those things. And I think you learn that you have to be patient and flexible, that it's really important to keep sort of everyone informed as much as you can, although it's really challenging because everything is changing day to day. And I guess sort of the theme for the entire time for me was all about flexibility. And I don't want to keep talking. I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. We will, I think we're saving all the questions till the end. So why don't we go ahead and move to Representative McKean, okay, and give him his time.
Well, and I'm not nearly as wordy as the speaker, so I'll make it quick. No, I have complimented Speaker Becker on the work that she did. You can't imagine how much pressure was on her. And when you get to not just a member, not in leadership, but also in a minority, we just don't have the same voice that the majority has, and that's okay. It's not something I want to continue in, but the fact is that what we were really doing was trying to manage what I thought were the two biggest things. One, that every representative was able to represent their district. And I think that's really important. And so that's conversations within our caucus of, things are going to look different, period. No matter what we do, they're going to look different. What can we accept, and on what basis do we accept how differently we're going to have to do our jobs? And I think that the ethic to that was every single member in that chamber, all 65 of us have, a constituency that we have to be able to represent. And so how do we do that best? And I think that literally that was the ethic that Speaker Becker had as well, which was, how do we get through all of this unknown in the best way we can? And I think this is kind of when we work best together, is that we're not really worried about politics as much as we are worried about how do we do our jobs to the best effect we can for our constituents. And not knowing what the budget was going to look like, not knowing what people's health concerns were, not knowing what the transmission levels of this disease were going to be and what the vectors looked like. It was really, how do we make sure that we are comfortable with how we can do our jobs and how our counterparts can do their jobs. And I think those were most of the conversations we had. I know Speaker Becker and I talked a couple times about what does this financial situation look like coming from the federal government? How can we use those dollars? How can we make sure that we don't eviscerate certain programs just because they weren't specifically called out in the federal language? And I think that those are two of the places where we work really well together to say, we kind of know what our job has to be. We know what we've got to do. And then it's a matter of how we get there is often where we differ. But I think in this instance, there was less difference than I would have imagined, because I think our noses were, all pointing in the same direction of this is where we've got to go and where we've got to get to. The biggest thing for me during this was, once you realize the devastating impact of a pandemic like this, first of all, it was to look back and see where did all of this structure really come from. And it was back from the MRSA and the SARS scares years ago and those epidemics, where the law was rewritten for Colorado, which gave the governor a huge amount of power. It basically said in a public health emergency, the governor can declare a disaster, and then he literally has, through these 30-day, now we see rolling emergency orders, but he has a tremendous amount of power to deal with that. And then there's the tension between what the governor is doing and what the legislature feels is their responsibility. And I know that was kind of top of mind for me, is what's being done, what are these executive orders affecting, and is it a legislative direction? Is it something that we would normally under most circumstances deal with through a bill and a long committee hearing and making sure that all the stakeholders are at the table? And there were a lot of instances where that was the truth, where really what we needed to be doing was having a much lengthier discussion of what those effects looked like and to make sure that people could come and testify. But that was actually the other little piece here, which was how do we get the public in front of us, either to testify or to witness what their government is doing? And I think that was kind of where I poked my head up above the water the most often, which was, hold on, even though we don't want a lot of people in this building, one, people have to be able to come and testify on our bills. And two, we have to be visible to the people of the state. And that means physically present when we're doing our business. And so as we started talking, and Speaker Becker and the House Services Committee that I serve on and staff were talking about how do we put this together, part of that was how do we make sure that there's a place for the people of this state to come and watch their government at work? Because what we were hearing from around the country was that a lot of legislatures were meeting in places where they didn't normally meet, in gymnasiums or in convention centers where they could get the social distancing they wanted. But they were not only in the physical location where people were used to seeing them, but there were not the typical recording or the transmission of being able to stream the proceedings. There were a lot of pieces of that puzzle that were important for us to get right. And to the speaker's credit, I think we really did. I think we got that right. I think that we made sure the press could be up in the gallery every chance that they had. We had a whole section reserved for the press, and we had a whole section reserved for the public to come. And even though it was fewer than maybe normally would come, it was making sure that people could go and access their government, which, I like reading the whole Declaration of Independence. And one of the big things in there was King George kept moving legislative locations and putting people in a place where they could not go and appeal to their government. And that's just wrong. And so I think we made sure that we did that. And we made sure that people could come to the place that they were used to coming, where our records are kept, where our staff was present, and they could get to their government. The biggest thing that I worked on, really honestly, during that whole period, not just the period when we were in recess, because I kind of disagree with the speaker. I think that in the end, I know the Supreme Court said that it's 120 days, and I actually am delighted that they said it's only due to a public health emergency, because that's the direction we had to have. Because my worry was that if we say, it's not 120 days, then we go from having a legislature that has this intense period of work to a legislature that just never stops, and we kind of take little breaks to get things right. And I think that was the danger, that we changed the structure that we're working under. But what I was doing was I had heard early on in this pandemic, I've been reading a lot of the journal articles. And so some of the journal articles were initially from different labs in China and different scientists talking about the way this virus penetrates human cells as effectively as it does. And it was talking about the protein that's on the outside of it. We've all seen those little pictures of the little mushroom-like appendages or cauliflower-like appendages to this. And that protein is what actually manages to get that virus in a cell so it can replicate. And it was a remarkable number of articles about how the virus worked. And that sort of just is my normal curiosity brain. But then it turned into a gentleman in northern Colorado who does pest control. And he was trying to say, you know, all these articles are how do you kill this thing? And how long does it last on surfaces? And what can you do? And so he came up with the idea that why couldn't you just heat a room or an environment above a certain temperature? And one, it would decontaminate personal protective equipment to a degree that nobody else was really doing. But also it was remarkable because it was the way of thinking outside the box. Instead of spraying disinfectant or using UV radiation, which can't get into the folds of a fabric, it was saying, you know, how can we decontaminate spaces? And some of those spaces were not just hospital rooms, but convalescent facilities, rehab facilities, nursing homes. How do you decontaminate these areas so that people can be secure in knowing that they are decontaminated? So talking a lot to the CDC, talking to CDPHE, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment here in Colorado, and making sure that they were willing to give the direction to care facilities that they can use heat to decontaminate both personal protective equipment and facilities. And it took a long time, but they finally issued a letter saying that it could be used, had to be above, I think it's 70 degrees Celsius, but really a very high temperature, but at the same time, one that is known to kill this virus and make sure that areas are decontaminated. Those are the things I was working on, and we couldn't heat the Capitol to that temperature, nor would we want to. But really, you know, it was that kind of stuff of what was the practical application of what we were learning.
Well, thank you very much. That's interesting how those, just all the different ups and downs and changes and having to adapt to constantly changing circumstances is pretty remarkable. Thanks for that. I think we are going to turn now to Senator Ginal, and we're still going to give her 7 to 10 minutes, if you can fill that.
I think it's already been filled.
they said everything.
You were asking for 7 to 10 minutes total.
No, each. Did you have more to say?
No, that's okay.
I'm just joking.
I have to get off in about 15 minutes.
Okay, cool.
I'll make it pretty quick because I think both Speaker Becker and Rep. McKean said quite a bit. But I do want to say this was a learning session, if any there was to be. And I think we're more prepared for a pandemic. Hopefully, God help us that nothing like this happens again, but you never know. I think that, you know, I worked along with Rep. McKean on protocols for the Capitol and how we would be able to get, you know, our legislators in the Capitol be safe with proper social distancing, with cleaning issues, with seating issues. And believe me, we had a protocol book that was probably an inch thick, right? Rep. McKean, would you agree with me on that?
I would agree with you on that.
And went back and forth and back and forth. And I have to say that after a lot of making sure a lot of things were in place to keep people safe, and the legislators who really had pre-existing conditions, you know, that didn't want to come in, how did we keep them safe? They didn't want to come in. I think this has been discussed. So we had to work all that out. But that whole protocol, the screening, how we got volunteers from various health agencies to come in and help do this every morning. And it was a very big task in a short amount of time. And I think we did an excellent job protecting our legislators, staff, as well as the people who came into the Capitol with all the precautions we took in place and put into place. I do believe that, you know, we did work well together. I think we realized this wasn't a Republican or Democrat issue. We had to work fast and we had to make sure that the safety of all people were taken into consideration. As far as the bills were concerned, I think the legislators also realized that they had to give up some bills because of, you know, losing $3.3 billion out of the budget. And myself included, didn't want to give those up, but realized it's for the good of the people and we needed to. We'll bring them back next year, hopefully. And, you know, we did pass some very good bills that were related to the CARES Act and for COVID-19, especially with telehealth and with helping people with their utilities, as well as with mortgages and rent payments and the like. So I think we came together more than I've seen in the past. And by the way, I did come in 2013 to 2018. I was in the House, and 19 and 20 I've been in the Senate. But I have to say that we work together very well. And maybe I'm not seeing all the little nuances or everything involved, but from my perspective and where I was and what I was working on at the Capitol for making sure everyone was safe from COVID-19, I do believe we had great collaboration. So I want to leave it at that.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. I think we're going to move to audience questions, and recognizing that Speaker Becker has what, about 15 minutes or so when you got to get off. And Bob, how much longer are we going to go for all the questions? We got about,
I don't know. Let's just start with the questions that we have so far from the attendees, if we could.
All right. So you want me to jump in on the cues?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question I've got here says, looking forward to 2021 and beyond, and recognizing the legislature has been challenged to prioritize during good times, how do you see the legislature prioritizing going forward with particular attention to issues and the budget on how that might affect older Coloradans, programs and services for older Coloradans? Who would like to jump in that question, answer that question?
I'll start. I say this a lot. I think that we're terrible at prioritizing. And I think it's partly because you get 100 type A personalities in a building, 101. And really it's very difficult to agree on where the priorities should be. But I mean, this year is going to be the hardest year. We swept a lot of the cash accounts into the budget to balance things out. We don't have that ability this next year. So I think that there are going to be some really difficult questions about what we fund and how we do it. I know that, you know, I fought to maintain the senior homestead exemption for making sure that, you know, that we do have tools in place for seniors to make sure that, you know, that their burden isn't so great. I think that's going to be challenged again this year because it's a place where there's a lot of money sitting there. But I think that these times help us, and hopefully that's the ethic that we all have going into this, is that we have to work better at prioritizing things. Where does education stand on that? Where does healthcare stand on that? Where does transportation stand on that? And really sort of set up that rubric of how we're going to look at the budget.
Thank you. Did Speaker Becker or Senator Ginal want to comment on that?
Rich, I'm going to yield to Speaker Becker because of her time limitations, I think.
Okay.
Thanks, Joanne. So really, we're just saying what's going to happen in 2021. So I think that budget issues are going to be an ongoing priority. The way the Colorado budget works, there's just not a lot of flexibility. And we spent through the majority of the reserves that we have. But, you know, there's federal mandates around Medicaid and Medicare spending. There are limits in how you can cut the Department of Corrections budget. And so that really leaves just K-12 human services, and higher ed. And, you know, we did things like reduced our funding to para, the state pension system. We tapped into reserves. We significantly cut higher ed and K-12. A lot of those were one-time cuts, and to do them 2 years in a row is going to be pretty devastating. So the budget picture is going to really drive everything. In fact, you know, the priorities that folks have individually, just that they've been working on for years, are going to have to take a back seat to figuring out ongoing responses to the pandemic. And the difficulty just in the legislature meeting, again, on any given day, there are well over 1,000 people in the Capitol building during the legislative session, between legislators and staff, partisan and nonpartisan staff, visitors, lobbyists, people coming to testify. And, you know, that probably isn't going to be, you know, we'll see where things are in January, but that's going to be really difficult. And you don't want to be passing legislation without a lot of public involvement. So it's a really difficult thing to manage. And so I think, again, like the word of the day and the word of the year is flexibility and being willing to adjust. In terms of seniors, you know, I think that the focus on public health and then the focus on healthcare spending is going to be priorities, and how that affects seniors and frankly, every class of citizen, every type of citizen in Colorado is to be determined. You know, does that mean more support for nursing homes? If we need that and we need more healthcare spending, where's the money going to come from? What is the federal government going to be supplying? Because we, like most states, cannot run a deficit. We have to have a balanced budget. The federal government can deficit spend. And frankly, we learned that since the pandemic, the federal government has injected $20 billion into the state economy, either through the PPP program, support for some of our healthcare efforts, the direct spending to the state that we got, all sorts of different programs that have been the only reason that our state hasn't completely crashed in terms of economy. I mean, you'd see so many more people out on the street, so many more businesses shuttered. So we need that federal support. And if Congress doesn't, you know, get to a new negotiated deal sometime in the next couple months, it's going to be devastating for Coloradans in so many ways. So I think there's a lot to be known about what the federal government does, how the pandemic changes, how that's going to change the 2021 session. What are the populations that are going to need the most support? So it reshuffles absolutely everything that's happening at the state level, certainly at the federal level. I mean, we just haven't seen an emergency like this in about 100 years. And so, you know, there were people that were wanting to work on various legislation, and I kept saying, every state department that might be implementing what you want to do actually has to focus on the pandemic right now. They aren't going to be able to devote resources to new programs, new policies, you know, new rulemaking, propping up new programs. So, you know, I would encourage legislators to put off the new of, like, you know, a new initiative and really focus on things that are very pandemic specific, and what's happening because of the pandemic, what's happening to our schools, what's happening to our hospitals, to our healthcare system, our insurance, our businesses, individuals who might be more, you know, immunocompromised, who might need greater support. That's really where folks need to focus their legislation. So that would be my advice and my expectation. And don't expect a regular session. It's not going to be just, you know, business as usual, both in terms of how the legislature itself functions, how the public interacts, how much legislation you're able to run, and things like that.
And you actually have sort of started to answer the next question. So you might want to add a little bit more comment on this, and then we can go to the others.
I think I've lost you all because it says my internet connection is unstable. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. I think we can hear you for now anyway. Are you, let me ask this question and see if you can hear me.
You're back now.
Oh, good. So yeah, I said you had, I think actually started to answer this next question. So I'll let you maybe complete here and then go to the others. And it was,
you know what, I've lost you again. I'm just going to answer this one question from Ed. I don't know if you all can hear me.
That's it. Yeah. So we're okay. Good.
It says, is there a group or committee planning for the state after the virus is hopefully subdued? Gosh, good, excellent question, Ed. Because if there is, I don't know about it.
And if you don't, who does?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is, you know, Hugh mentioned there's a lot, the governor has a lot of independent authority right now. I think there needs to be greater, you know, legislative interaction. And not just legislative. I just think, you know, for a lot of reasons, there's not a lot of legislative interaction with the public right now. And you know, what they'd like to see, and, you know, what is the governor doing? And so sort of that level of coordination, I don't think is really great. And I'm term limited. I'm not going to be around in 2021. I've definitely shared my thoughts with a lot of people about needing to have you know, a greater presence and hear from a lot of people and hold briefings and hearings. But right now that's not happening. The governor might be planning something. I'm just not aware.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Thank you. Well, so I'm going to just keep scrolling down on the questions here. The next one is, where are we with visitation to senior community care? Senior care communities. CDC gave guidelines in May. And according to HICPUF, everybody's working on policies and procedures, but there still hasn't been anything officially released as to how adult protective services, ombudsmen, or even families can go into facilities. And again, a question about our families being involved in how they can communicate with their loved ones in those facilities. So if you got any comments on those, I'll give you a chance to go ahead.
I'd like to chime in on that. At the very end of session, I think we were realizing that we've done a great job with telemedicine, and I'll add to that. We've been utilizing it 100 times more than we utilized it before COVID-19. And so that's helped out for patients and seniors or anyone who needs to see the doctor that doesn't have COVID-19, doesn't want to go into the doctor's office or in the hospital. Telemedicine has really stepped up to the plate. It's being utilized very well. But one of the other issues that was brought to light was people who were in the hospital that did not have COVID-19, that unexpectedly were dying or from other causes. There was a bill that I brought forth with Senator Smallwood, and I don't recall who in the House, that did pass in regards to working with the hospitals more about having one designated person for someone who is in the hospital, doesn't have COVID-19. And that one designated family member or whoever it is would be tested and would not have COVID-19, be able to be in the hospital with that patient in those times when they want a loved one, maybe at the end of their life. And this will continue on. I think there's a little bit more work we have to do on it, working with the Hospital Association, but I thought that was one really good step towards people who are hospitalized, and it hopefully will move into a nursing home assisted living situation, but that hasn't been touched yet. It's more of the hospital issue. So I'm hoping that we can move this further along the line so that seniors in other living situations and residences could also have that ability to have a loved one around.
Speaker Becker.
Thanks. And I just wanted to, before I have to jump off, one thing, is there planning for when the pandemic is over? And I guess one thing I want to say that I think is it's not going to be a single moment that the pandemic ends, right? And things are going to change permanently, and we don't know what those are. I mean, I think that the way people work is going to change permanently. How they commute, what becomes priorities is going to change permanently. We don't know when that is going to be, when we're really making that shift, or what the world's going to look like. So I don't want to be critical of is there planning for when the pandemic is over? I don't know, but I think it would also, I think when you're in the crisis, you have to focus on the crisis. So I should probably clarify, my comments around that. I just want to address a couple of these questions. It says, are you aware of discussions at the federal level about flexible dollars to offset some of the state revenue losses in the upcoming year? Yeah, I'm very aware of them, and have been, sending letters to our delegation and talking to them on the phone. And, I think it's an easy message for people to say, oh, the state doesn't need money. The state is only doing things to support people and businesses. It's not the state getting the money. It's the state getting money to make sure that others are supported. Schools are supported. People in higher ed, which is an enormous economic driver and job driver in all of our communities here, but honestly throughout the state. That we can continue to have funding to support public health, to support human services. So it's, I think that there's been this line about we don't want the state to have money. The state is a pass-through and is organizing it and getting it to other places. So right now there's, legislation is stalled at the federal level. And that's going to be a tragedy across the United States if they can't do something. I'd like to see legislation pass. I'd like to see Congress be explicit in saying the legislatures have a role in distributing that money and figuring out where and how it gets spent. And making sure that there's a lot of public involvement in that. One of the other questions is about the census. So census counts are down, and the president announced a little while ago that he was actually going to cut the census short by 1 month. Instead of ending it at the end of October, he decided at the end of September. So, Colorado's doing better than some of our surrounding states, but we aren't doing as well as we could. I think it's around 60-ish% response, and we need that to get better. There's a huge coordinated effort, nonpartisan effort to get census counts up, but it's more challenging when you can't really go door to door. So I think the question is what can be done, and what can be done is being done. We put $6 million of state money into supporting organizations to do outreach across the state to get census numbers higher. So, I think both the federal effort and the state effort are significant, but the census only comes around every 10 years, and a lot of people still are moving, constantly just aren't used to doing it, forget about it, don't prioritize it. So encouraging people to do it would be really helpful. Broadband connectivity continues to be a pressing issue around the state. Has broadband been a priority topic within either the Democratic or Republican caucus? We ran bipartisan legislation. I was the sponsor in the House. Republican senators in the Jerry Sonnenberg and Don Coram were sponsors in the Senate. We had a very bipartisan effort to put about $120 million into broadband 2-3 years ago. And so it has been a huge effort. The people who sponsor that all represent rural areas, and I think we're doing a good job. There's, it's like the portion of the state that has broadband is high, it's always that last mile, right? It's that last 10%. And once you get it to the state, then it's about increasing capacity and connectivity, increasing options, reducing costs. There's always more work that we can do in broadband, but the focus has really been about getting it to the areas that don't have it, rather than making it cheaper across the state or making it, increasing options across the state. It really is, how do we get to that last 10% of Colorado? Because that's the most expensive portion, and you just don't get your bang for the buck, right? There's just not that many people there to support, bringing in broadband financially. So that's where the state dollars come in, and that's really where the focus has been. I've tried to address a lot of questions really quickly. Thanks for having us. I'm going to jump off, and Hugh and Joann can take over. Appreciate being asked. These guys are well informed on everything. I just want to say, Coloradans, both Democrats and Republicans, are absolutely always thinking about seniors. There's people across the state that are being impacted very differently due to the coronavirus, and we're going to continue to have to learn and to adjust. And so, please stay in touch through Rich or individually with your ideas on how we should do that. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good rest of the day. So I'm going to turn for a moment to Representative McKean and ask him, did you want to just pick and choose the questions to answer, or do you want me to go ahead and keep reading down? And
no, in fact, I'll just kind of piggyback off of what Speaker Becker was talking about. So the bill that she ran that was so important about broadband, and then we'll kind of work our way back into things from there, was taking the money that we have always put on as a tax on phone bills for what we call the last mile money, right? So it was copper lines that were to get to the farm that's 30 miles down a dirt road, which never made financial sense for phone companies to serve. And a lot of those people literally didn't have phone service for years and years. And so the last mile money had been reserved for exactly that, the incumbent carriers to use to get copper wire down these long roads to get to that last farm. When we start talking about broadband, not only has technology evolved, but quite literally so has the ability for incumbent carriers to serve everything in their area. And so Becker's bill actually was a good move in the right direction, which was to make sure that it wasn't just for copper wire. It was to make sure that last mile money could be for fiber or for other things that get that connectivity for those people. I think that my effort in the last year or so has been to push. We have two different funding sources right now for sort of, if you can imagine the less lucrative customers. And one is that last mile money. The other is the 911 fund. And the 911 fund is basically to help carriers keep their systems updated to make sure that everyone has access to emergency telephone service. Well, the challenge right now is that about 89% of all 911 calls generate from an internet over IP or voice over IP, a VoIP call. And so it's basically through your broadband connection, through your cell phone, something else. And so the number of 911 calls on copper lines has just plummeted because people drop their landlines, because people have a system in their home that uses their cable or a fiber connection. And so my effort now has been to say, look, why do we have these two groups that are sort of doing similar things, but are trying to serve customers who don't have service currently? And why are we keeping them in two separate boxes? What we really should do is combine their efforts and make sure that they're working toward the same thing. And so what they can do is make sure that what we're doing is not just saying, okay, this last mile money stays in last mile, 911 money stays over here, but really treat it as a pool and make sure that everyone has access. Because what we're really looking at is what does that look like? In Loveland, we just started a broadband enterprise. I know Senator Ginal up in Fort Collins, they have connection. And one of the things that we look at is how do you make this available to your citizens without overburdening them? And I think that that's one of the ways the state can help is we already have these funding sources. How do we use them so that the $100 million worth of bonding in Loveland isn't just put on those residents and then we can serve out into the more rural community? If you go back to kind of how we take things, and I love what Senator Ginal just said, which is telemedicine has been a boon in treatment of patients that don't need to go to the hospital, don't need to risk themselves exposure to patients who have COVID. And I've always said this, I mean, you go to the hospital, there's sick people in that hospital. I'm not sure I want to go there, because Lord knows what you can catch. And that's part of what we're talking about with telemedicine. You can call, you can get answers that you need. But one of the things that I think we're going to have to deal with is when we had the Medicaid expansion years ago, we ballooned the number of people who had access to Medicaid. And I think that's in and of itself, it's a good thing because people had more access to care. However, hang on a second, let me just decline something. And that makes me come back. One of the things that happened with that is that our reimbursement rates are not nearly high enough. And nor is the state timely in reimbursing doctors on Medicaid charges. And so that is one of the biggest problems that I have in my town, is I have very few Medicaid providers right now. And so I really like, I know that Senator Ginal has worked on this in the past, but direct primary care is literally one of the best things that we can possibly do to increase care across the board. And that means that it basically is a subscription type service with a physician, so that people who are within our Medicaid system, but people privately as well, have access to a physician that knows them, knows their family history, knows all of the things that give them the best care. And I've said in the past that, when you go to the ER, you don't get the same quality of care you get from your family physician. And I hold to that, is that when you go to the ER, you have a lot of tests that are very expensive because people don't know what your history is. So they have to figure it out. And when they figure it out on the fly like that, it ends up being expensive, and it ends up in often treatments that are less effective than if you were going through your family doctor, going through your primary care physician, making sure you had that. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I think that that's really one of the places we look in the future as to how we do what we're supposed to do under the Medicaid program, but we do it in a way that delivers better care and contains cost.
Great, thank you.
And I just want to add something. Representative McKean talks about Medicaid, and a lot of people that are listening and are on this call are not Medicaid, they're Medicare. And this is a concern of mine that was just brought to light a little during this pandemic. And I've had several discussions with Summit Stone, which is our behavioral health folks up here in Fort Collins, and talking about how great telehealth is working, especially for depression and loneliness and all the other issues that we're utilizing telehealth for. But I also said, well, how about seniors? And apparently what surprised me, and maybe it's not a surprise to you, is Medicare is very limited for telehealth for seniors. They only take a certain amount. And that was extremely surprising to me, because let's face it, seniors have loneliness problems, behavioral health problems, addiction problems, all the same problems that everybody else has, except if they're on Medicare, Medicare may not pay for Summit Stone help or other types of help, behavioral health, telehealth, telemedicine, and that's concerning me. And I happen to disagree with some of my colleagues, and I'm not sure if Rep. McKean's in on this one or not, because I didn't hear him, but I believe seniors have not been a legislative priority in the past. And I always believe that if there's a cut to be made, it's going to be made to our seniors. Case in point, if we didn't fight for senior dental care, that would have been taken away from us with this budget cut. I too, Rep. McKean, fought to keep our Senior Homestead Exemption Act. I think it's extremely important. Does it need some changes? Absolutely. But if we didn't fight for that and we didn't have our voices heard, that might not be happening right now. And to me, that's just unexplainable and unacceptable. Also, I look at housing, affordable housing for seniors on a fixed income. I've been dealing with a few mobile home parks up here up here in Fort Collins, where they're 55 and older, and they are getting their rents raised. They're on a fixed income. They're getting their rents raised. There was one woman that I had a discussion with in one of those parks, and by the time she pays all of her bills and her rent pad bill and utility bill, even just insurance for her car, what she has left over from her Social Security is $11 a month. So how can one that's, I believe she's 75 or 76, what are we doing for our seniors? I mean, we need to help them have more affordable housing. And I think there's two bills that came through this past session, and I'm glad they did because they were necessary. One was 1201, which was mobile home parks and the ability for people in mobile home parks, particularly the senior mobile home parks. They may be able to form their own HOA and may be able to buy that mobile home park with negotiations. The other one is updating rules and regulations in mobile home parks. They're really hard on some people. And that was House Bill 1196. All of these I see a lot of seniors suffering with, especially up here. And I'm sure it's not just in Fort Collins. The other is transportation. One that I think is extremely important. We've been working on it for several years. And I believe, Rep. McKean, you were on one of these bills on non-emergency medical transportation. Really important. Kidney dialysis patients, timing, and that's just one example of where these people need to have accurate, timely pickups to doctor's offices, and they need to get the funding that's necessary for this non-emergency medical transportation. The other area, which we tried about this year, but didn't get there because of COVID, was retirement security. So many of these people that are in the mobile home parks or in affordable senior housing, which there's not anywhere near enough of, but they're just living from month to month. So how do we prepare future generations for retirement? I think some of us were lucky enough and we're taught that, but a lot of us, somehow this has fallen through the cracks for generations that came after us. So the last thing I want to say is addressing the workforce shortages that we're going to have. We're going to have the highest demographic population of people over 55, maybe 60 and older that we've ever had before. And we need to make sure that we have the proper geriatric care for these folks, and that nursing homes and assisted living residences have the proper staffing, paid a living wage to take care of our loved ones or ourselves for that matter. But workforce for seniors is another issue. I mean, there's a lot of us with gray hair, and I feel like we're being, we're kind of, ageism is out there and it's real, and we have a lot to give. And a lot of people, I mean, I know workforce is hurting right now, but hopefully everything will come back. And that's my positive thinking. And we have a lot of seniors with a lot of institutional knowledge, just knowledge about life and a business or whatever it is, that want to be in the workforce again. How do we put them back to work? How do we get them to get placed into jobs that they will do a wonderful job in? So besides the workforce for seniors and a workforce to help take care of seniors, these are other issues that are constantly going through my mind as to how do we help our population of 55 and older, because like I said before, I don't believe seniors have been a legislative priority. And now when they're becoming the the largest population in the state of Colorado, we should make them the focus of quite a bit of legislation. I don't want to minimize any other groups of people, but seniors need to be, need to have more attention than they've had in the past.
Let me just really quickly, because I think that the job piece is important to just speak to. And you know, what we're going to see as the impact from COVID as companies have downsized is that the increase in unemployed senior citizens is already alarmingly high, and it's going to go higher. And I think that what Senator Ginal says is incredibly critical, that you not only have a lot of knowledge, but you also have a work ethic that we're all lamenting that we don't see in a younger generation. People who show up on time, who show up every day, who make sure that they're prepared for their job. And as a contractor, I can tell you that, you know, the best work I get out of the people who have the most experience. And part of my job in the legislature in the last 4 years has been trying to find opportunities for the skilled trades to make sure that youth have an access to an apprenticeship or something else. Well, guess who is the best person to teach them in that apprenticeship? It is literally the people who've been doing 3 and 4 decades of that kind of work. And so I think that there is a place in that system where we can really have sort of a mentorship program where we can offer employment opportunities through contracts, through tax credits and other things, so that employers want to have people who have that kind of experience on staff to help apprentice the younger generation, I guess I'd say. But I mean, that's my problem, is in my world right now, it is incredibly difficult to find somebody who has 3 decades worth of experience in plumbing or electric, because those are often people who started a business and are now retiring and coming out of that. And yet there are a lot of people who would love to have a 20 or even a 30-hour week of doing the work that they've always done, where they are partnered with an apprentice who does a lot of the physical work, but they are there to make sure that they know how to do it well. I think that's really what we look at, is where is the experience and what is the savings? For me, it's a savings. I don't have to redo a job 3 times. I've got somebody who can actually do the job the first time and make sure that everything is done right. And if we can pair that with the apprenticeships that we're bringing up, that serves us all for the next 50 or 60 years.
Thank you.
I'd like to, Rich, can I ask a couple questions?
Bob, you had a couple questions.
Yeah. And these are sort of related to they are related to what's been said previously, but not immediately previously. So one of them comes from Karen Brown, and she asks about how will the state determine when we're no longer in an emergency?
Beats the heck out of me. I mean, honestly, and this is what we're asking the governor for, is give us the parameters, give us what you're looking for, and I honestly believe that the people of Colorado are desperate for this kind of information. What is it that you're looking for that tells us that we're kind of in phase 3 of returning to normalcy? Is it an R number? Is it an R value? Is it the number of hospitalizations? You know, I've been critical of this governor, but partly because I'm just critical of this governor, but I was of Hickenlooper too. But no, I mean, I'm critical because I've got people calling me asking that exact same question. When are we going to be back to semi-normal, whatever that looks like? And at the same time, you know, when our hospitalization rate is going down, we have some small spikes, but then we see that it either plateaus or dips again. And yet we just re-up the $60,000 a day convention center to have a bunch of beds available that nobody's in. Like, we're in a budget crisis. How on earth are we spending $60,000 a day to keep a facility open that we're not using? And so I think those are really good questions. And honestly, I don't have your answer. I keep asking it. They get tired of me asking it.
I bet.
I think that, you know, we are still looking for the answer to that. You know, we've seen other states where they've had low counts and then all of a sudden it blips up, like Georgia and some other states. And I think Governor Polis is just being extremely cautious, because I've heard that there's going to be a second round, just like there was a second round of the pandemic in 1917 and 1918. Is it going away? I mean, I don't think anybody has the answer to this. I think we are just looking at scientific information right now and trying to put it together, and just observing? I mean, you've seen how many pharmaceutical companies are putting together or racing for that vaccine, and also the latest about the treatment with plasma cells that was just mentioned, I believe, by the president last night in an emergency situation. I think I think we're doing well, but I think it's because of Governor Polis being extremely cautious. Is it too cautious? Can you ever be too cautious?
Well, I don't know. I just read this morning where cases are spiking again in Spain, and they had it well under control, and now it's shot way up again. A couple of tax-related questions, and actually these are both on the ballot. One is to lower our tax rate, our income tax rate, and another one has to do with the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment and some changes there too. So we have about 6 or 7 minutes left here. So would you care to comment on those?
I'll make mine super quick. I think that the idea of lowering rates and broadening the base is not a bad idea. I think that what we really talk about is, the net effect of that is not necessarily less revenue. It's often more revenue, but what you're really doing is creating the incentive and taxing less on the income side, and then making sure that more people are paying tax into the system and sort of reducing a lot of the credit. So that's one. Gallagher is something that I think what we're about to see in commercial real estate. I think Speaker Becker and Senator Ginal both mentioned, just the way we go to work has changed dramatically. And what has happened to the oil and gas industry in Colorado, a lot of commercial real estate is going to be empty. And I think that Gallagher we're going to really, really, really feel what is happening with that. And, as we have less commercial real estate and as it becomes valued less, then that burden is going to go up on all the remaining commercial real estate. And what's going to happen to that is we're going to drive business out of the state. So I think we have to look at it. I'm not convinced this is the absolute best just to repeal it. But then again, I think we've got to be looking at all of what these suggestions mean.
As far as Gallagher is concerned, I think it's a double-edged sword, because I want small businesses to get the help that they need, which would help. But also, if you look on the flip side, it's going to increase residential taxes, and seniors are on a fixed income. They may have, they're living in their homes for X number of years. They probably bought it at a very affordable price. And I'm not saying this is across the board, but so what happens? I'm looking at it from both sides, and I'm glad that people are deciding on this, because I think it's a decision that really needs to be discussed, and all sides need to be looked at. We do need help with our special districts. We do need help with our schools. But also, what about the residents who own homes, and especially seniors who have homes and are going to get a tax increase? That's where I say it's a double-edged sword.
Well, and it's doubly tricky because it's a county by county issue, really. I mean, I've read where the Denver metro area, taxes have gone up anyway. I mean, Gallagher really hasn't held the taxes down that much here, but they have. It has in other locations. So.
Well, and let me just say this, Bob, because one of the conversations I have is from a lot of people who are moving here and see our residential tax rate as a great boon to a family, right? They're coming here, and seniors as well as younger families say, you know what? Wow, in New Jersey, I was paying $11,000 a year. If what we do is just decide to repeal Gallagher, the challenge that we have is that we raise those residential property taxes, and yet we haven't changed the underlying structure of how we fund things like education. In New Jersey, you pay $11,000 in property tax a year because the state does everything. They do all the bonding for the building of schools. They literally fund the entire program themselves, and we don't do that. We have local control where school districts are concerned. And so now on top of your residential tax rate and your mill levy going up, you're also going to have possibly bond issues that add to that. And that's my worry, is to Senator Ginal's point, is that what we do is people on fixed income are maybe going to be handed an untenable bill that then is very difficult for them to fit into their fixed income. And I think that's a huge risk that we have to look at.
Okay. What I'd like to do, Rich, if it's okay here, we have a sponsor that would be the Senior Resource Center, and we'd like to give Kreslin a little time to talk. And then what I would like to do after that is I will unmute people who want to ask a question.
All right, and so we are. I want to make sure our two remaining panelists are clear on whether or not they can leave, or if they have time they can stay. So why don't you let them in on that too? Our time expectations.
Okay, so can you stay until 11? Are you good?
I can stay for probably another 5 to maybe 10 minutes. Okay. And Chris, I really want to hear what you have to say. So
yeah,
for you.
And the same for me as well.
Outstanding, thanks.
Okay, Chris, you're on.
All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate you all being here and giving us your updates. Just so you're aware, Seniors Resource Center is a nonprofit. We've been in business over 42 years, and we provide wraparound services for older adults who choose to age in place in their own homes. We provide in-home care, community services, meaning we help people get out of bed, bathing, meal prep, dressing, laundry, all of those things. We also offer chores, deep cleaning services for folks to be able to stay in their homes longer. We also offer adult day respite care in 4 of our locations. And again, with the pandemic, we were, as of March 20th, unable to have people in our locations. And our respite care is designed for folks that are have home caregivers, usually a family member who takes care of them. Many of them have dementia, Alzheimer's. And when they're in our location, they have an opportunity for to be with other people, to avoid isolation, participate in some group activities, camaraderie, things like that. But it gives their home caregiver an opportunity for some rest. And a lot of those caregivers are still going to work. And so with pandemic in place, that has changed things dramatically for these people. And as you all did, we had to have a big job ahead of us, as well as many other agencies and businesses, of figuring out how are we not only taking care of our older adults, but how are we taking care of our staff and employees as well. So we immediately shifted our roles here, and we began providing meals for our clients and their family. The goal here was to make sure that we were keeping the older adults as safe as possible, keeping them, their caregivers, out of the stores as much as possible. So to this point, since late March, we've now delivered over 18,000 meals to these folks. Along with that, they've been provided with supplies, hygiene items, cleaning items, things like that, as well as activity kits. But a big piece of this has also been the ability for them to participate in Zoom calls like this, which again is helping them to still be engaged with people that they're familiar with. They have activities, all kinds of things that go along with that. And it's been amazing. People are really benefiting from that. And I think there's a little myth out there that older adults don't use technology, and that's not true. It is available. They do have access to it, and their families help them. Other organizations, other nonprofits do the same thing. One of the challenges that we're up against, though, is how we're able to continue to provide those types of services with appropriate funding levels. Most of our funding is all on a reimbursement basis, cost basis. And, Seniors Resource Center is not unlike many, many other nonprofits. We don't have buckets of reserves, right, waiting for us. So when we're billing for our service, sometimes it takes, 2 to 6 months to get reimbursed for that. And right now, because we can't actually have people in our adult day locations, what we do provide them, the meals, the Zoom calls, things like that. We can't bill for our typical rates. So it's much, much less. So we really would love to have some flexibility on that, to be able to provide these services, get reimbursed for them so we can continue to do that. And I think, Senator Ginal, I really appreciated your perspective that seniors have not been a priority. And that's true, they have not been. But in the discussion about, maybe is there more support for nursing homes and skilled living? I think, yes, there needs to be to some degree, because those folks need that care. But organizations like us, we keep people out of there. The cost to keep people at home is roughly 50% less than what it costs the state to provide that care. And people can live comfortably in their own homes. We also know that with the pandemic, they're staying safer, they're staying healthier from that. But the isolation piece is starting to show its wear on individuals, which is really unfortunate. So the additional funding for those kind of things would be greatly appreciated in how we're able to keep people safe. We also know that coming out of the pandemic, the need for our services is going to be much, much greater. Families are going to realize they don't want their loved one in a nursing home or skilled living. They want to keep them at home and safe as long as possible. And how can we continue to do that? So those are just kind of the big pieces that that we look at. And my last piece of this, though, is that we really would love to. I would love personally. This is kind of my little mission, is to see that organizations like Seniors Resource Center and many, many other nonprofits whose mission is to serve, is that we are given the opportunity to serve from that basis of trust, and that the funding that we're provided goes to the missions that we have said we are going to do. We always know that there's those couple percent of people who don't do those things, but then it leaves out so many people that really need the service. So I think it's imperative that it's come to light that organizations like us really do what we say we're going to do, and we are destined to serve the people that really need our help the most.
Well, I will tell you, I've appreciated your input. I ran that bill with Representative Gray, 2 years ago, that put money aside to keep people in their homes to age in place. Representative Lebsock and I tried to take money from the governor's mansion restoration fund to put it toward the exact same purpose. And I think that
I remember that.
Yeah, right. I am fully convinced that aging in place is the absolute best model to follow, to make sure that people are in the environment and around their family and around their neighbors, and just that they convalesce so much better from things that happen to them. But just there is such a lesser impact on the system. Let me ask you a really quick question, Chris, and then I'll go. But when we talk about the fact that you're on this reimbursement schedule and that it takes time to be reimbursed for the things, in one-time money, what would help with that? If we could create sort of an endowment, if you will, to where you have a reserve that means that you can operate out of that. And again, proving that you don't eat your reserve up for other things, but basically just making sure you have the money in the bank so that you're not always just waiting for that reimbursement to do the next thing. What amount would help with that? And is that then something maybe we can go and put in the budget so that we do create that kind of buffer for organizations like yours?
Well, thanks. That would be fantastic. And I think the way to do that best would be for us to be able to project out, here's what it's going to cost us to do business for the next 6 months to 12 months. 12 months would be ideal. And, and in doing business, it's also about how we pay our staff, our facilities, keeping the lights on here. And Senator Ginal made the point about paying a living wage. We increased our minimum wage here to $15 at the end of last year and want to bump that up again. But if we are given the opportunity to forecast that and request those dollars for an annual distribution ahead of time, that would be a game changer for organizations like ours. And
what I'm suggesting is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Which is that we don't appropriate an annual amount, but what we do is one-time dollars that say, look, if your forecast for, over the last 5 years has been that you're going to have $2.5 million of expenses that you're going to need to be reimbursed for, can we find a way to make sure that you have access to those dollars as reserve dollars, and that then that takes the burden off the day-to-day from you? I'm not sure that you're going to be able in the current budget cycle and financial situation in the state to say, how can we get an annual appropriation? Yeah. But can we find one-time dollars that make sure that you have that stability in your budgeting to know that, if you're 10 or 15% on either side of that, that you're able to continue doing what you need to do.
And
if I could jump in,
can I just say one thing about that? I do think that we should make sure that we keep our state funding in check, and that maybe this is a one-time thing next year, Hugh, but I think it should be a line item in the future that is assured that you get X amount of dollars every year, and that would increase because this population is increasing and they need it. So I think we have to do our due diligence in fighting and not fighting, but you know what I mean, going to the JBC meetings, maybe fighting, maybe arguing, whatever we do. We all get along now. And making sure that, number one, this is heard. This is, we need to be the voice out there, and we need to keep doing this as long as it takes to get this line item so that we have got our senior resource center and other senior funding there for our seniors, because if we don't do it, it's not going to happen. I mean, and I don't want to say this is, I think, it's probably a generational thing, because when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, you don't think you'll ever get to your 60s and 70s and 80s. But I think when you're in our shoes, Hugh, that we realize that this is a part of the population, and I realize this being in the legislature, that does not get the support that it needs, and we need to start making sure that we're expanding that as much as we can.
Senator Ginal and Representative McKean, have I got a deal for you? I'd like to follow up with you, both of you, on this question. But I will mention that, in fact, we do have an existing line item in the budget that's called State Funding for Senior Services. Mm-hmm. And that line item is partly some general funds and partly some transfer funds in the Older Coloradans Cash Fund. And in fact, I'm convening, I've been working with a group of senior advocates, and including folks from the governor's office and the departments, to address basically these same kinds of issues around that funding, and also looking into the long-term stability and sustainability of state funding for senior services. And we already we have for years gotten some federal funds, and in recent years have also received state funds. But as has been mentioned, with the projected growth in the older population and increased demand for people to be able to stay in their homes as long as possible, these kinds of services, which are funneled through the area agencies on aging that are existing in all areas of the state. The one up in Larimer County is in the Larimer County Human Services Department. In the Denver region, there's DRCOG, and Boulder County has a AAA. And Chris knows this because DRCOG funds him fairly significantly. But anyway, in terms of looking at those budgetary issues down the road, we're already on it, and we'd be happy to keep you informed. And I really like the idea that you brought up, Representative McKean. So we'll add that to our list of things to look at, and we'll follow.
No, I would love to talk to you about it. I'm going to run. I see Senator Crowder is on now. Thank you guys very, very much for all the chat.
Thank you for being here. Thanks very much.
And
Bob, you want to bring?
can I just say one thing? Because then I will probably jump off. I want to say hi to Senator Crowder, but I just want to say that we have work to do. And I think two of the things I'm hearing from seniors and folks even that aren't seniors, but is the housing issue.
Yeah.
Concern that their Social Security isn't going to be there in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, they are scared. They're scared. And the biggest one I hear is medical bills and the cost of prescription drugs, which I will continue to work on. And I had to give up 3 of those prescription drug bills this year because of COVID-19 issues, but I will bring them back because I think we have major concerns with our seniors on being able to get the medications they need. They're concerned about Social Security and just the housing issues that they're facing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Senator Crowder, welcome.
Thank you. How are you this morning? Sorry I'm late.
Well, we're glad you were able to join. Would you, we're getting kind of toward the end here, but would you care to make some comments?
Well, you know, I am abreast of the situation on the elderly. I think we should continue to work, you know, for them. You know, I do have some reservations when it comes to, you know, creating savings accounts for them. We as older people don't like government messing with our money, but other than that, I think rural Colorado, you know, should not be left out of the folder on this. But I think transportation and, you know, medical issues and whatnot should be addressed. So I, you know, even though I'm term limited, I will continue to advocate for them.
So how can we include you as you fade away from the legislature? How can we continue to include you in the conversation on aging issues?
Zoom is always a possibility.
Okay.
So, I don't know that I'd be, you know, I'd like to stay included, involved in it. You know, I would, you know, somewhat be a watchdog for rural Colorado and the issues in which we face. You know, and I think the only difference between rural and metro is your transportation issues. You know, we cover long distances and whatnot, and I think that that's an issue that needs to be, you know, contended with.
Okay. Well, we will definitely include you when we have
well, I appreciate
conversations.
It. Being a lame duck is not, you know, is an interesting facet of what I'm at. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, whether you're a sitting senator or a citizen who can provide input, I mean, either one is fine.
Well, the one thing that I really don't like to see what's going on right now is the separation of nursing home recipients from their families. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that there ought to be a better way to handle that, and I think I don't know why we can't test the family members before they come in to see the elderly in nursing homes. So I'm a little bit taken aback by how that is going. You have to realize the people that work at the nursing homes, they leave every day to go see their families and re-enter. So I would like to see some type of movement to have family members be tested on site at a nursing home, so they would be allowed to visit with them. I have a relative in a nursing home, and I will tell you, it's not fun to, you know, we talk on the telephone through the window. I'm outside and he's inside, and I don't agree with that policy at all. And I understand the ramifications of COVID-19 on the elderly, but I also understand there should be some testing done and there should be funding for that. So
yeah, we have.
That's one thing I really don't like seeing going on right now.
Yeah, we have a number of people who share that concern and would appreciate any help you can give in correcting that.
Well, I do visit with the governor's office regularly on this issue. Mm-hmm. You know, And, you know, it's just one of those things where it's, there's not much movement from the governor's office to rectify this travesty that I see going on.
Okay, thank you. How is everybody doing on time? I mean, I guess people will bail off if they don't have time. And Senator Crowder, do you have a few more minutes for some questions?
I do.
Okay. So Rich, do you have some questions for the senator?
Well, I think maybe we can ask him if he'd like to say a few words. We had asked the other panelists, Senator, like what was your experience with all the changes that had to happen for the legislative session to occur, and just see if you had any comments about that or any little inside information.
Well,
did you come down, or were you only remote, and those sorts of things?
Well, you know, I do attend more meetings now because of virtual. I just got off of one a few minutes ago, but I didn't really, you know, it's hard to comment on this without sounding partisan.
Yeah.
I do not like the direction of the state overall. I don't like the heavy-handedness on this COVID-19 regulations. And I believe that the declaration of disaster is meant for some very specific issues, such as fires and floods and whatnot. So this is a new realm for all of us. But I think that, you know, I've always been a firm believer. You have to realize I'm in the age bracket where it does affect the most people, senior citizen. But I also believe that we should have a little bit of trust in our own immune system. You know, I think that there's a lot of issues that I, you know, really am not very vocal on, but since you ask, I'll tell you, you know, but I don't want it to sound partisan, because even if the governor was Republican, I'd be saying the same thing. But I think the seniors have been most effective. I do not like the fear factor out there. That's what I don't like more than anything. If government and politicians like myself would just clearly state, you know, these are the issues that we're facing, you make up your own mind. You decide what is best for you in your circumstances. But there's so many people that have been swayed from this, that due to a fear factor from the news media, from the governor's office, and from the other side, the politicians. I just, you know, I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. And I think even the movement of what's going on in downtown Denver is part of this fear factor. You know, it's scaring people. And, you know, I would hope that the mayor and the governor would get together and say, you know, this is enough. Enough is enough. Call out the National Guard or whatever you have to do. I'm not going as far as saying federal troops should be here, but, you know, I don't want any martial law in Denver, but you know, it's amazing to me what is going on. But like I say, I don't mean to sound partisan. I'm looking at the issue itself for what it is. And, you know, I'm sure the governor, I don't know his heart, but I'm sure that he thinks he's doing what he thinks is best, but it is an overreach of government. And, you know, I just have some issues with it, but hopefully we'll get past it shortly.
Did you, during when the legislature came back in session, did you come back down to the Capitol, or did you participate remotely?
You bet I come down to the Capitol. That was my duty. That's what I was elected for. You know, and I'm not saying that there was nothing heroic in that, but I just I'm of the age where I do not fear it. I understand it, and I respect it, but I do not fear it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Those are my questions. Any other thoughts, Bob?
So Senator Crowder, you've been very helpful in the past on the senior related issues, or older adult related issues. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to use the right word, but we've really appreciated all the help that you've provided along the way. I know you were a sponsor of the bill that created SAPCA, and you've been involved in I know I remember you voting specifically for the bill that we introduced last year to increase the number of geriatric healthcare providers. And we'd like to bring that one up again. So if you have any thoughts about how we can do that, and in the current budget situation, even if it's just getting something on the books, you know, we'd appreciate hearing about that.
Well, you know, I think, you know, seniors, you know, my take on seniors, basically as a veteran service officer at a nursing home, Home Lake, and that's where I became knowledgeable of how they think and they feel. And I looked at them not as elderly in a nursing home, but as people, and that's what they are. So I think that anything we can do to progress, you know, especially healthcare in rural Colorado, and that's why, you know, I believe strongly in the use of nurse practitioners and all the forms of medical services. So I think that that's something we need to keep hitting. I know we've tried several times on several issues, such as having doctors start in rural Colorado, new doctors start in rural Colorado to help them financially with their student loans and whatnot. And that should be continued at all times to get people acclimated to rural Colorado. Not only medical services, but also dental services. You know, I think what we've done with Medicaid is actually improve the access to elderly for dental as well as medical. So I think we just need to keep looking at the overall picture of transportation, of health care, of dental care, prescription drugs. You know, I think that, you know, there's a lot of advantages financially for the elderly for some of the prescription drugs, and I think they ought to take advantage of it. I'm pretty much on board with everything that's happened with the seniors, except the government getting involved in savings account for them, because I know that, and you know, I would actually I would be offended if the government got involved with my finances on me saving money. You know, I just have a problem with that. But you know, I don't think that's a place for government. I think that even the federal government, we should start looking at how we can extend Social Security beyond what the federal government now says would be the tipping point on Social Security. I think we need to look at the future of the elderly people coming up at that point in time. So I think there's a lot of issues that if we don't approach now, it's going to be that much more difficult at a later stage. And with the budget situation like it is, it's going to be very difficult. And as you're aware, we were able to maintain the home deal, where you get
homestead exemption. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, which I'm a recipient also. You know, I think I don't know if we can do that again this coming year. I don't know where the budget's going to be, but I think that we should, you know, we should find every possibility to open this economy back up, so we don't have to have a decreased budget next year, where these things that we were able to save this year are in jeopardy. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and I think that you know, I see in the paper the unemployment came down in Colorado. I think it was to 7.4, which is a good sign. But until we get these you know, basic restaurants open, you know, that hurts our meat supply, our agricultural index, and you know, I think there's so much to this, and it's so complicated to put your finger on one single thing that would help, you know, restore where we should be. I think we need to keep working at it.
Thank you.
And that's just a brief synopsis of what I think. You know, there's a lot more to talk about, but I think if people realize that we will need services for the seniors is the main thing. As spoken a few minutes ago, someone said that if you're young, 20 to 30, you don't even think of that. Well, you know, we have to have them thinking about it now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to come up with ways to help them think about it. So
sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks
My
for
pleasure.
thanks for joining us.
You bet.
And I think we're going to conclude the meeting. And I would appreciate any feedback from folks. You can just send me an email and Rich.
No, send them all to Bob. No.
No, send it to Rich and me. With your comments about the meeting, how you think it went, what we could do better the next time, those kinds of things that would be very helpful to us as we schedule more of these meetings going forward. So thank you all again. We'll end the meeting now.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, sir.